Thanks very much, Kwasi, and thanks to all the speakers for their eloquence and also for keeping within the 8 to 9 minutes. We're going to come to you in a moment, but I first of all just want to give you the preliminary result. This is from your preferences expressed as you came in, that for the motion we have 191, and against the motion 68. And you might think that that was a pretty gloomy outlook for one side of the panel, until I tell you that we have the don't knows at 136. So the don't knows are all there to play for, as well as the chance of persuading people to switch sides. And you'll be voting again at the end of our Q&A. So hands up who in the audience would count themselves as being from the colonies. That includes America. And hands up who doesn't count themselves as being from the colonies. Okay, hands up the don't knows. That's very encouraging. Everyone here knows where they come from. Okay,
from the well-off former colonies like the United States and Australia to the two former colonies like India and Bangladesh, which are economically not so well-off but are growing. Why is it that I do not come across in the substantial output in the media, radio, television and print, the words British imperialism or British Empire, as much as I come across those words here in the UK? Is it just me, or am I right in thinking that, like, this is partly Ramachandra Guha's point actually, that like the English cricket team, the British Empire plays well only at home and no longer in the colonies?
Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to take a whole bunch more questions. There was another chat there. Go ahead, ma'am. Yes, there, please.
Hello, I'm not a man.
No, sorry, I can't see from here.
That's okay.
I said ma'am, actually.
Oh, sorry. So my point really, and it ends up as a question, is really about the actual topic of the debate, and it's a general point about my problem with the word should. So, you know, should Britain's former colonies stop blaming empire for their ills? When, to contextualize the question that's coming up, I think that can they? Yes, definitely blame them in my view, but does it help? Should they continue to? And really, what is there to be achieved by their continuing to blame? And the question actually goes to the people that I support, which is the against panel.
Yes. Hello, thank you. This is a question for the against. I think only Richard Gott told us what he thought the purpose of blame was, and that was to get reparations. Would they agree that one of the most successful transitions that we've seen in recent years has been South Africa's transition, and that used a process of truth and reconciliation rather than blame? So could you speak to the question of the social and historical purpose of blame as opposed to truth?
Excellent. Now, we've only got about 6 minutes before we go into the final speeches. So to be fair, I'm just going to carry on taking questions right up to 8:15, and then all the points that have been made can be answered from the panel. So let's go ahead, sir. Yes.
Could I just point out that there's absolutely no point in people blaming this country for the release of its empire, because the fact is that the country after World War II just could not afford to run an empire. At the end of World War II, the national debt of this country was over 250% of GDP.
Yes,
we're grumbling today that Greece has got 180%. It's all very cheap to have a commonwealth which we can run and assist with, but there would have been no point in retaining an empire which we could not have afforded to maintain.
Yes.
They have the wealth and the expertise after 50 or more years of British rule to do it themselves.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And anyone who thinks the British Empire should have continued a lot longer is welcome to see you afterwards to debate that. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. I'm going to work my way forward to the front and then stop on the dot 8:15. So brief comments, please.
Very briefly, just to pick up on Richard's point on reparations, I think that that issue has touched the heart of the title, because the former colonies have been dubbed members of the developing world. And without economic empowerment, I do not think that we can bury the issue, particularly for countries in the Caribbean, which are small island states, and as a consequence of slavery and colonization, we do suffer, economically. So I think that Richard's point that there is a valid case for reparations hits the nail on the head and ought to be expanded on.
And can you just tell us which country you come from, ma'am?
Jamaica.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. Let's keep on going down. Go on.
Surely when we're talking about the former colonies, we actually need to be much more specific, and we need to recognise maybe that there's actually a spectrum. I think maybe the Indian example is one, but it doesn't really translate to the sub-Saharan Africa one, especially in East Africa, and maybe it's different in India, but in East African newspapers today, most of the articles about economic development also always refer back to the colonial legacy. Like, surely we can't just sit around making generalizations about this. We have to understand.
Well, thanks very much.
The former colonies had different experiences.
The motion doesn't say all Britain's former colonies should stop blaming the empire. It doesn't say at least one. It just says Britain's former colonies. So you have to, I think, accept that the concept is a generality. Yes, go ahead. Someone.
If being part of the empire was such a negative experience, why is the Commonwealth Organisation still flourishing?
Very good. That's a nice, short, sharp question.
Well, joining us now here in the studio is Dr. Maria Misra, a historian and expert on India and the British Empire, and Nabinjit Singh, spokesperson for the Sikh Federation in the United Kingdom. Dr. Misra, should he have apologised?
Yes, I think so. I think it's about time the British did start apologising for their empire.
I came here to pay my respects and to remember all those innocent people that died. This was a deeply shameful event in British history, one that Winston Churchill at the time quite rightly said was monstrous. We should never forget what happened here, and in remembering, I think it's very important we always make sure that Britain stands up for the right to protest peacefully all over the world, and I think that is the thing to remember. I also wanted to come to Amritsar to see the Golden Temple, the Holy Temple, to understand how important it is for Sikhs right across the world, including those in Britain, because there are so many people, so many Punjabis in Britain that make a fantastic contribution to our country, and we should say.
Nearly 94 years after the Jallianwalabagh massacre, Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron today visited the site and described the incident as deeply shameful. But he stopped short of a public apology. Mr. Cameron is the first British Prime Minister to visit the site. Many organisations here had demanded a full-blown apology. But the British media quoted Mr. Cameron as saying later that we shouldn't reach back into history.
David Cameron stopped short of an apology, something that many seemed to expect. But he came close. In the Visitor's book, he wrote,
"This was a deeply shameful act in British history, one that Winston Churchill rightly described at that time as monstrous. We must never forget what happened here, and we must ensure that the UK stands up for the right of peaceful protests." And as Cameron prepared to leave Amritsar, he explained why he did not apologize. "In my view, we are dealing with something here that happened a good 40 years before I was even born. So I don't think the right thing is to reach back into history and to seek out things you can apologize for. I think the right thing is to acknowledge what happened, to recall what happened, to show respect and understanding for what happened."
And the message seemed to satisfy many.
He came here and paid obeisance to the martyrs, shows that they feel that it was a great mistake.
Yes, we've both been tearful a little to think that it was our ancestors that committed this atrocity, and we hope that by him coming and making this gesture of visiting the garden, it's going to improve even further the wonderful relationships between the British people and the Indian nation.
Visit of Cameron was a great gesture from his, but after 4 years in 2017, in the changed scenario due to Brexit, must have triggered the Indian origin MPs in UK and the London Mayor, Theresa, to have an apology.
And ahead of Jallianwalabagh massacre centenary, an Indian origin British MP Virendra Sharma has tabled a parliamentary motion calling for Prime Minister Theresa May to apologise for Jallianwalabagh massacre in Amritsar in 1919. Labour Party MP Virendra Sharma is urging British parliamentarians from across the political spectrum to come together to support his parliamentary motion. He's already attracted 5 additional signatures from British lawmakers so far.
I put an early day motion in the House of Commons in London on Jallianwalabagh and asked the present Prime Minister of the country to apologise to the inhuman act took place about 100 years ago. As centenary year is approaching, 1919,
in an exclusive interview, our London Bureau Chief Manny Clark spoke to lawmaker Virendra Sharma on the motion tabled at the Parliament. Let's listen into what he had to say.
I'm here with Virendra Sharma and we're talking about the early day motion. Why was it important for you to table it?
I believe it, and I strongly believe in it, that this is an history which we need to know and pass on to the future generations. This is a centenary going to be in 2 years' time.
An early day motion, how much support has it got so far?
Yesterday when I left the House of Commons, it was 6. I understand that there's 2 or 3 others who assured me they will be signing on. Maybe 8 or 9 people so far have signed. But I'm not disappointed because it was put in a couple of days ago. And I believe that once people start reading it, once they start hearing about it, where the other people, the community people who understand and believes in it will be approaching their MPs, more people will sign on.
My view is that the British government should apologise for the Jallianwalabagh shootings. Some people use the word massacre, and it's important to apologise for the errors done in the past.
And that is, of course, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who has said that the British government should apologise for the Jallianwalabagh massacre in India's Amritsar. Khan, who arrived in Amritsar on Tuesday, paid tribute to the martyrs of the massacre in Amritsar.
The wicked things that took place simply do not feature in British syllabuses. And I think unless the British people learn these things at school, we'll never learn the lessons of empire. We'll never learn the full scale of the horrors that happened. And I think, in a sense, for a politician on a trip to raise funds for London, apologising is very easy, but it's also political expediency. I think you have to go far deeper than that and redress the roots to this problem. Is that simply that the British don't remember the things that they once did. When you have a racist Civil War general who kept slaves and was fighting to keep the slave trade going, I think much better than removing the statue and forgetting these people is to put a plaque up explaining what they did, explaining about the slave trade and educating people. So I'm all for not erasing the past, but educating people about it. That's my view.
All right, William Dalrymple, thanks very much for joining us this evening and sharing your perspective with us on that story.
Jallianwalabagh is a remembrance for us. I congratulate Mayor Sadiq Khan ji, who has raised this question, that really to make the relations normal and to draw lessons from the history, the British government must apologise.
Sunil Kapoor has come to mark the 100th anniversary of his great-grandfather's death. The figure's disputed, but he was one of hundreds of men, women and children shot by British soldiers as they gathered to celebrate a holy day. Want a full apology.
It's as far as you can go in diplomatic language and think. Winston Churchill described it as monstrous, David Cameron talked about it as shameful, and if it was genuinely one of the worst things to have happened in British military history, then it seems appropriate that we do move as far as we can.
There have been attempts to say sorry. The Queen removed her shoes at this most holy site to show respect. Today, the government spoke of deep regret, hinting at a possible change of heart.
This is work in progress. I can't make any promises. I feel that perhaps we do need to go further. We perhaps need to do a little more even than the very deep regrets that I have set out today.
In Amritsar, children chant the nationalist slogan to Mother India, while Sikhs in Britain would like history lessons here to include this story, along with a full apology.
The British House of Lords debated the Jallianwalabagh massacre last night amid renewed calls for the UK to apologise for the murders ahead of its centenary. Hundreds of people were...
And my grandmother used to tell us the stories. And you know, those stories are still in my mind and I can't get rid of them. That why these so many innocent people were killed, regardless how much political difference of opinion any government or any community has. They have no right to kill people.
Lord Karen Billamoria also spoke passionately about the tragedy.
Why can't the British government apologise? I spoke to my 82-year-old mother and told her that I was going to be speaking this debate. I visited Jallianwalabagh with my mother, and she said, son, it was nothing short of murder.
Lord Desai says he believes the time for an apology is now.
I think something will happen because now both the diaspora is very important in the country itself, and we have a London mayor who is a son of a Pakistani origin person. We have a Home Secretary who is a Pakistani origin son.
Both lords have written to Theresa May to ask for an official government apology, and they are supporting an exhibition that is touring around the country from Manchester, Edinburgh, Birmingham and London about the massacre. So Britain remembers all her history.
The British Parliament is set to debate on the Jallianwalabagh massacre. The debate has been initiated by lawmaker Bob Blackman. During the debate, the Theresa May government is expected to reiterate Britain's stance since the 1990s of expressing deep regret for the massacre that will complete its centenary on the 13th of April. This is, of course, not the first time that the UK Parliament will discuss the matter. A similar sentiment was expressed in February this year during a debate in the House of Lords.
It's the 100th anniversary of the Jallianwalabagh massacre. There is fresh pressure on the United Kingdom to apologise. If you wonder what stops Britain from saying sorry, a word that they taught the world, then here is the answer. An apology for Jallianwalabagh massacre would renew calls for further apologies. When the UK was a colonial superpower, they had systematically conducted such atrocities across the world, from Asia to Africa to even Australia.
The tragedy of Jallianwalabagh in 1919 is a shameful scar on British Indian history. As Her Majesty the Queen said before visiting Jallianwalabagh in 1997, it is a distressing example of our past history with India. We deeply regret what happened and the suffering caused.